Now, North Korea has said it will not allow any prominent Americans to travel to the country to appeal for the release of Kenneth Bae. The 44-year-old was sentenced to 15 years hard labour last week for what the regime described as hostile acts. Comparatively few Westerners have been to the secretive state, but one who has is the author Adam Johnson, whose fictionalised account of life in North Korea won the Pulitzer Prize last month. The orphan master's son tells the story of Pak Jun-do, who works as a soldier and a naval spy before ending up in a prison camp. Well, Adam Johnson joins us now from California's Stanford University. And your book has been really praised for offering a deep insight into North Korea, and yet you spent a relatively short amount of time there. I mean, how did you go about understanding the place?
Well, thank you for the question. It's good to be here. I did do several years of research. Unfortunately, you can't tell the North Koreans how long you'd like to visit. The Korean culture fascinates me, so I would have liked to have stayed longer than the week that they allowed me.
And what were you able to do in that week, and how important was that week to actually your understanding?
Well, the portrait that I made of North Korean life, and I wanted to focus on what it was like to be an average North Korean. How do they live? How do they communicate? How do their families work? What do they aspire to? That portrait was made by the testimonies of defectors. But when I went to Pyongyang, I wanted to get the surface of the country right. What did the streets look like? What were people wearing? What did you smell in the markets? What was the expression in people's eyes? I knew going in that it was illegal for a citizen of North Korea to interact with a foreigner. So that was the one place in the world where you cannot talk to a North Korean, is actually in North Korea.
You're pretty noticeable, or you would have been in North Korea, and I just wonder how people react to you, given that.
Yes, I'm 195 centimeters tall. I look much physically different than the average North Korean. But in North Korea, you have to understand that the prisons are real, re-education is real, and in that country, the terrorism of the state is transferred to the family because families as a group go to jail. And because it's a crime to interact with a foreigner, even the suspicion that you were taking an interest kept people from looking at me. And as I walked through the streets of Pyongyang, through crowds of thousands of people, I had the experience, honestly, for the first time in my life, of being invisible, as people parted without even looking at me. They didn't even glance at me and look away. They seemed to know that there was something dangerous in their field of view, and they edited themselves. They edited me out of their world, and no one ever looked at me.
Now, you've put North Korean prison into your novel, and I want to try and turn your attention to Kenneth Bae, the American who's currently in prison now, because, I mean, when you look at that news story, you imagine that North Koreans, well, that there's a lot of, not just dislike, but maybe paranoia or hatred of Americans. I don't know whether you picked up on that, and I don't know how how do you think about his situation now?
Well, I don't really want to speak to the particulars of his case, but all the prisons in North Korea are political, whether they're work farms, re-education camps, or the Kwanli-So camps, which are the irredeemable camps. I doubt that he's going to go to one of those camps. He's a very valuable person. He's certainly going to be used as a bargaining chip. And I would think, though, that he's terribly afraid. It's a serious country. Labor and privation are much different things there than we think of them here. And until someone comes to rescue him, he's probably looking at a long, unhappy time there.
And did you come back with an understanding of how they feel about Americans?
Well, I read the North Korean propaganda every day. Their newspaper's called the Rodong Shinmun. They publish it in English, so your readers can go to either kcna.jp or just Google Rodong Shinmun and read the propaganda that North Korea puts out every day. Japan, America, and South Korea are the great enemies of that state, and they're daily putting forth tirades against the West, and that's the only news that people understand there. You have to understand that except for a very small portion of elites in Pyongyang, The entire nation has no other access to information other than what's state-sponsored.
Adam Johnson, thank you very much indeed for joining us.